Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 11 o'clock. My name is Crystal Ramsey. I'm a research associate and instructional consultant at the Schreier Institute for Teaching Excellence. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Suzanne Shaffer, Jorge Santiago-Blay, and Barb Eshbach from Penn State, York. And their session is entitled Using Adaptive Learning Technology and Reflective Exercises to Improve First-Year Success in a Paired Developmental College Reading Environmental Science Course. I have nothing else to introduce after just reading the title.
That's all you need to know.
They've been working with academically at-risk students, and you're going to get to hear about the effects of adaptive learning technologies, reflective exercises, and in particular, I think, the effects on lifelong learning.
Exactly.
An interesting instrument. So, welcome all of you.
Yes, thank you for coming. And to my partners in crime, they're going to come in at different points. So thank you for coming. This has been a labor of love really for us for 2 years. And so we ran a pilot last fall. We'll talk about that and what we learned and what we did in the fall that we just came through. And I'll talk a little bit more. This is a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning project, which we have been trying to build on our campus, that kind of practice. And so this has been a really wonderful collaboration between the three of us, and we've learned a lot. So anyway, I'm going to get started because we have a lot to share. So we're going to have you do something to get started. We don't have computers in here, so you can't really do the adaptive learning technology, but we wanted to get you a feel of it. So on your handouts, look on the first page, on the front page, and just stick to that page. There's a question on there that asks you, something that we probably all feel we know the answer to. So go ahead and try and answer that question, what causes the seasons? And below that, you want to answer, how confident are you about your question? So we're not going to take a long time, but just so you get the feel of what adaptive learning technology is. We're not checking people's in. And no looking ahead, Chris. Oh, gee. You can. I don't care. It's fine. Okay. All right, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But you think about how confident you were of that answer, right? And that comes into play. It's going to be a really important part of this technology. So this is a mouthful of a title, but really what we want you to know, we're going to talk about adaptive learning technology. We're going to talk about the use of reflection, which was really important. And I loved a lot of the stuff that Daniel Pink was talking about. It was like, yes, that's what we were trying to do, right? So much of this. So I'll try and tie that in if my old brain can remember to make the connections. But we were really looking at success for our first year students who are coming in underprepared. And so we tied a developmental college reading course with an environmental science course. We're going to look at that. And again, we saw this very rich learning environment for our students. We feel like, they absolutely benefited from this, and we'll show you some of the data. For both of us as instructors, Dr. Blay and myself, it was just a really wonderful, wonderful collaboration and experience. And we've also benefited by trying, since this was our first Scholarship of Teaching and Learning project formally, and we're trying to learn as a campus and grow with that. So we're doing something that we have to come up with a name for something. So we're calling it Springboard Partners, and that's where Barb comes in. She's our head librarian. She's just started in a tenure line position. And so, right, as we're all learning this, we're trying to learn it together. So she's with us through this whole project without formal responsibilities, but a humongous help to us. This beautiful PowerPoint as we go through, thanks to Barb, and lots of the work on the publication that we did, Barb was instrumental with. So she was really a contributor as well, but is going to be springboarding into her own project next fall. And she'll talk to you a little bit about the value that she found in this opportunity to kind of tag along without the pressure and learn the process from IRBs to, all the things that come into play that can really be challenging. So we learned a lot through the process. And so what was the issue that drove the development of this project? And we have students who come in to all of our campuses who are underprepared, right? And so our students who come in with a SAT critical reading score of 450 or less are encouraged to take LLN 005 on our campus, which is the college reading course. And for 20 years, we've offered that course every fall semester, and students have taken it, but it was always a standalone course. So we were always wondering or worried, were they really taking those skills and were they transferring them to their other courses as much as we'd like? And we had the sneaking suspicion that they weren't. So in the fall of 2012, we decided to pair that 3-credit college reading course with a content course and say, if everything you're learning in the reading course, you're going to apply to that content course. So we tried it with psychology in the fall of 2012. And for various reasons, mostly pragmatics, the professor would have had to change textbook for us to incorporate some of the things we wanted, and that's asking a lot. And so Dr. Blay was very willing to say, yeah, and he'll get a chance to talk to you about why he wanted to make those changes. He was very willing to partner, and I'm so glad that he did. And so, we looked through the research, we think that this is going to be valuable. What's the research saying? And so, Zhao and Ku are saying that, we really do see this added value of learning communities when you're doing the kinds of things we were trying to do, which was teach people reading and learning strategies and apply them directly to another content course. And so we felt pretty good about that. So in fall 2012, this was the kind of the overall rationale for what we were doing. So on the one hand, we were looking at developing reading strategies, right? The typical kinds of things you do in a college reading course. We were looking at developing metacognitive awareness. We'll talk about that more a little bit, and deep learning strategies, and then moving into critical thinking. And they were doing those things, they were applying it to the psychology text, and at the same time, because these are first semester students, we're saying they're coming in with lots of learner attributes that are problematic, right? They're doing lots of things wrong, they're thinking about college in certain ways that can be getting in their way, right? What are these attitudes? And so this was kind of the layout of what we did, but what happened, right? So we're looking at their exam scores in the fall. So there were people in the psychology course who were not in the reading course. They just signed up for psych, and that was the same in BiSci, right? And these were their exam scores, right? So those people who were just in psychology are in the green, and the people who were also in the paired course in the gray. So exam 1, boom, 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 crash and burn. What's going on, right? And not only are they doing worse in every exam, the gap is widening. So this is like not what you want to see in your project, right? But so we got a lot to learn here. Only a 50% pass rate. They came in with an SAT verbal average of 404. So we had to really go back to the drawing board and say, what in the world is going on? Can we fix this? So what's not working, right? So we looked at student learning attributes, things like curiosity, resilience, motivation, confidence. We were looking at those, we thought we were we getting data, right? So it was really hard to identify their current state coming in, right? It was hard for us to measure growth because we were doing this patchwork kind of thing. Oh, here's a tool, here's something. We could use this, we could use reflection. It was just all over the place, right? So we couldn't, we needed a more systematic approach, and we knew that. And in terms of the academic skills, one big naive decision on my part was if we would go back to those exam scores, they didn't do so badly on the first exam because they're coming in with lower SAT scores. We didn't expect them to do the same as everybody else in that Psych 100. Well, what happened? Because they did so well, we were coaching them through everything they had to do for the first exam. I say, well, great, you guys know what to do now. Go ahead and do it on exam 2, 3, 4. We're going to move on to other things, critical thinking, the other things we need to do. Well, guess what? Duh, come on. Naive on my part, right? So they stopped doing them, and even at the end of the semester, they said, you should have made us do those things. The fact that you made it, optional, we didn't do it. And so I said, okay, that's not going to happen in the next pilot. But we also realized that there's this kind of misconception going on that students think that because they recognize concepts, that that's the same thing as understanding concepts. And so there's this notion of the illusion of competence, that they think they're actually more ready for exams than they are, because when they're studying, they're looking at terms, they're like, yeah, I see photosynthesis, I know that word. But then when you break it out on an exam and ask them to give examples or ask them to put it in a scenario of problem solving, they can't do it. So we knew we needed to target some of that, right? And lots of the research showing that when students do more self-testing, they're more aware of this this problem of do they recognize or do they understand, right? So how did we want to change things? So for this first part, in the student learning attributes, we found a tool from researchers at the University of Bristol called the Effective Lifelong Learning Inventory. And we're going to talk about that in greater detail. That really targeted these kinds of attitudes that we wanted to have them look at. So we're going to look at that in greater detail. And on the academic skills side, besides the fact that I was going to make them do those things every week, and I was going to grade them and collect them and hold them accountable, we also added the adaptive learning technology, which helped us add that self-testing piece. So we're going to look at that and how we did that. Okay, so again, these were the three things that we wanted to make sure that we incorporated, these big changes between the fall 12 and fall 2013. And so the new course design, still doing the reading skill development, 1 day a week. They do weekly toolbox. We added the adaptive learning technology that they'd have to do on their own at home every week. We'd score that. And then instead of just the piecemeal kind of who are you as a learner, how strong are you, what do you need to know, we use the effective lifelong learning instrument. Again, we'll talk about that in greater detail in a process of self-reflection, goal setting, coaching, right? And then they would apply that to their lives and then again to what they were learning in environmental science. And we, in fact, in all of our data saw huge gains on this side. And we're really, really excited about that. So we'll show you that in a second. So I want to give Dr. Blay a chance to talk about his participation in the project.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for being here. Good morning to all. So, this is a typical, in my opinion, layout of how many of our non-science major students, universally I would say, look like. Bored, not wanting to be there, etc. And I wanted to change that. I really do. So I want my teaching experience to be better for me, and I want their learning experience to be better for them. I want them, meaning the students, to be as engaged as I am teaching, or even more, okay? And there is an element of, oh, Dr. Blay, I don't, math or sciences is not my thing. And I just want to help them overcome them. What motivates me to partner with Barb and with Suzanne? And this is one of the mildest examples. They actually deny the other examples I really wanted to put there. Be as it may, punchline is to improve science literacy. Okay? I want to have students who want to learn, okay, for whom learning is in their heart. What is the origin of this particular slide? A number of years ago, I had an experience, one of those earth-shattering experiences that made me think, what is that I am all about? What is that this particular situation teaches me? And I said, I know, it just came into my consciousness immediately, okay? Like, for example, when there is a student who asks me, oh, Dr. Blay, can I do a little research with you? First question I have to ask myself is, what is your motivation? Is it in your heart, okay? Second issue that I am not man enough to ask directly to the person, but I have tools to try to see if the person has the lights, as I like to say, okay? The machinery up here. And then the third one is the practical issue of time and money. The person may be motivated, the person may have the lights, the machinery, but he or she doesn't have the time, or sometimes these particular projects require money. So that may be a problem. Maybe we can work next semester, okay? Now, addressing the issue of time, early on in my life at Penn State, York, I did a little non-scientific survey of how much time are you students putting into this particular class. And the reply, the results are to me not surprising. the honor students put more time on the average, according to them, that the Gen Eds. As a matter of fact, I think this is rather inflated reply. I would say 1 to 3 hours is closer to reality. Be as it may, what is that they commented along with their alleged input of hours? They said, oh, Dr. Blay, there is too much to learn, too much material. Haven't we all experienced this? Second one, I want, and I will add here, a so-called study guide. Do not get me started on that. I despise totally study guides. I want to be on the record very clear on that. But this third one is something real. Many of our students have to go to work to earn a living, and going to work, takes time. Okay? So, given that limited amount of time, what can we do to have them make the most out of their limited time experience? The time to study. Okay? So, I am a typical straightforward lecturer. I love to lecture. I love to talk. Those who know me know that. But I am very animated. Okay, those of you who may have been in my classes, it's not a boring at all lecture. Nevertheless, environmental sciences has typically been a 2 hours and 45 minutes, 1 day a week affair. That's hard to digest. Okay? And so what I like to do is to break it into chunks of 15, 20 minutes, and I'm getting better at that. Have some sort of hands-on activity, some sort of real learning experience. Okay, this is not just to play. And then resume lecture. The idea is that the discussions, other activities, etc., supplement and maybe reinforce the learning goals that I am trying to accomplish in the lecture. And then the third thing that I like to do is to have worksheets, which I should have brought here, but essentially they are pieces of paper with the actual learning objectives from the textbook, or some of them added by me, with a little space in which they can take notes so that they are focused into what we are supposed to be learning. Okay? And I go, learning goal number 1, learning goal number 2, very structured. Okay? Like this radio personality Osgood, I think, page 1 or page 2. I'm like that. What do they get to do at home? Weekly online quizzes. I believe nowadays they can take it twice, and it's the highest score, everything randomized. These days I am giving 6 multiple choice exams. I believe in one of my classes I'm doing 7, because remember, it's too much material, so 3 chapters per exam. Participation, also known as attendance, even though attendance is illegal. So I just call attendance participation, and so let it be. And I regret this. I am totally against extra points, but because they were doing something for us and putting more time, more of that limited resource that they have, we said, okay, let's give them some extra points, which is motivation, or extrinsic motivation. If they complete all and only all, no partial extra credit of the components that will help us with the data. I regret that we gave 5 percentage points. I think now that we should have given 3 percentage points, but I'm not going to fight about that. And that's it.
And what will the market bear? We didn't know. If we went to 3, would they play? Would they participate?
So we aired on 5, and we got everybody, right? So, but in the end, he thought the grades were inflated, and that's important, right? So when we did our data analysis, last year, we looked at only exam score, so we didn't count that inflation in there, but we'll look at that. But I think, one of the great things in the project was our ability to collaborate. And so we were always having these conversations about what's happening, about this student, that student, who's struggling, what's going on. This person wasn't in class, get on them, right? And so they couldn't escape the net, right? There was no way that they could. And of course, these were smaller class sizes, right? So I think I had 22 to start. You had another 22, so close to 50 total.
Yeah.
But we were on them like crazy.
Oh,
So,
my
yeah.
final thought, excuse me. It's a lot of work on the part of the faculty member, not question. One has to be dedicated. One has to believe in this, in other words. I think the most meaningful moment is one day, towards the end of one of the semesters, that an African American lady came over to me very excited, Dr. Blay, I got 82 in the exam or something like that. 70, much higher score than she had taken. It shouldn't be getting like on the 40s and 50s. And she added a very important expression. I studied so hard, to which I replied, maybe studying works. I have this very venomous sense of humor, and that was.
But, and I think that was one of the things that's a benefit of the pairing, right? So if you had a 3-credit course on environmental science, now you've got it tied with another 3 credits, where they're actually doing work for that 3 credits. They're getting a lot more time on task, right? So there's no surprise that that would help them do better, but getting a lot more time with the content. So now let's look at those components, right? So this is the one I'm excited about both of them, but the Effective Lifelong Learning Inventory comes from researchers at the University of Bristol, as I said, and they've done a lot of testing. They have a huge data set of looking at the validity of the items in the scale. So it's a 72-item online self-report. They go online, they take it, and I don't know if you can see these, it's in your handout. If you look on page 3 at the top, you'll be able to see the 7 dimensions. So through their research, they were able to identify these 7 dimensions of what they call learning power, the ability that helps students to be stronger, more powerful, more engaged learners. So changing and learning, meaning making. So as soon as Daniel Pink was talking about those things this morning, I'm like, yes, critical curiosity, creativity, learning relationships, strategic awareness, and resilience. And so when the colleague showed me this inventory, I thought, this is really getting at what it is I was trying to understand about my students. So we were really excited about that instrument. And I'd like to say too, and I don't want to forget to say that I think the power of this project came from, and what he was saying, what Daniel was saying this morning, that we were always hammering home, because this was students' very first experience of college. And on our campus, because we're commuter, oftentimes students say this doesn't feel any different than high school did, and we lose them. And so we were always hammering home the point to get them to say, look, this thing that is college is life-changing. And if you engage, if you enter in, this time you're going to be changed by the experience if you let it happen to you. And to get them, it was, I don't want to say we were cheerleading all the time, but we were trying to awaken that spark of, this is a big deal. This is life-changing, right? And I think I know they responded to that. So they take the inventory, right? And they get a spider diagram back that shows where their scores are in relation to the 7 dimensions, right? And so you can see here, like critical curiosity, they score lower on that. The places where they come out further, they're scoring stronger and higher on those elements, right? So everybody took that. People in his course that weren't in mine, and people in mine. So we had some kind of comparison points.
At the beginning of the semester.
Yes, we took it at the beginning and again at the end.
Yeah.
And then, so my students that have me every 2 weeks, we take a different learning dimension, and we go through this cycle of self-knowledge. Look at your diagram, true or not. Do you agree with it? Where do you see, and then some cycles of reflection over a 2-week period, some action planning, and then coaching on my part. It was an ongoing conversation through the semester, right? So we put a couple examples in here so you get the sense. So when we got to changing and learning, the first week of any cycle, I always try to do personal things. And then the second week, I try and tie it to academic things. So the first week we'd say, okay, changing and learning, what does that mean? Look at your scores, look at the descriptions of that from the researchers. You get a little guide that goes along with it. We had our campus career counselor come in and talk to them because we were about midway in the semester and already people were like, I need to change what I was thinking about. Now I'm not good at math. I guess I'm not going to be a doctor. You know what I mean? So they're adjusting already some things. So he came in and said, okay, the ability to change and learn is going to serve you well, right? So they did some reflecting, did action plan. But week 2, we just didn't know what we were going to do because we wanted it to kind of bubble up too. What was going on? What did they need? So week 2 for us just happened to coincide with exam number 2. Grades, and so they never, this is my husband, so we'll self-disclose now, right? So, I mean, they would get the exam Wednesday night, bam, Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, I'm in their face. What the heck happened, right? Here's your exam score. And they never figured it out. Like, we're just that connected us faculty, right? We got your data like that, right? So they never did figure it out, which is great. So they weren't doing well. So I'm like, what are you doing? All these things we've been talking about, you're not doing them. So tell me, what are you really doing? So I did a meditation. I said, everybody get back from the computer. Eyes closed, lights down, deep breathing. I want you to think about how did you prepare for this exam? And everybody quiet. And I said, okay, I'm done talking. Push back in, get on your computers. I want you to describe and make as great a detail as you can. I want to know exactly what you did in the week or 2 weeks coming up for this exam to prepare. And they did. They went to town. They gave me such great data to describe exactly what we know. They waited till the last minute. They did it all in one day. All the things we've been talking about, right? So it gave us this great, rich opportunity to say, okay, we know that changing and learning and your ability to change how you do things is going to impact your success. Are you willing to change what you've just done for exam 3, for exam 4? Write about it, think about it. And then that helped me to develop the next class, which was, this is what a study session should look and feel like. Because I really think they don't know. Even though you talk about it. So I said, we're going to do it. Bring your books, bring your stuff. 45 minutes, this is what it looks like. When I sit down to study and learn this stuff in chapter 3 or whatever we read, this is what it looks and feels like. So I modeled it, I talked about it, they did it, and they loved it. At the end, they're like, can't we just do this every week? We'd be successful. I said, I'm sorry, you have to learn to do this on your own. But now, there's nobody saying, you've done it, you see it's valuable. Are you going to change? And it was always those kinds of questions, right? So they go back and they reflect. So that's the process. So just another one real quick, because he did talk about creativity in your handouts. We won't have time to do it because we've got to get to the data, but I want you to see at least. So look on underneath the spider diagram, the creativity piece, right? So week 1, I had an artist and a poet come in because they're thinking, oh, I'm either born with being a creative person or I'm not. I didn't get the gift, I'm not creative. Right, so we had our art faculty and poetry faculty, English faculty come in and say, no, it's about hard work, it's about discipline, it's about risk taking, it's about doing it. We're trying to break those assumptions, right? And so that was week 1, kind of this discussion. And then week 2 was, all right, you need some tools. Because if you're gonna really believe that creativity is something we can all become, we can all grow at, this Scamper is a tool. So we had them in groups do like, okay, plan a party. And now go back and use that tool to modify that party, right? So it's a tool you can use for any kind of problem solving, right? And then go in and reflect on it. And an important part of the reflection is to not only get them to think about themselves and where they need to grow, but imagine the possibilities of the future in which you now are a creative person. What does that look like? So it's a really important part of reflection. And I'll talk about that in a second. So that was the flow. And some of it just bubbled up as what they needed, but it was always those 2-week cycles, personal and then academic. And so in order to use, if people were thinking, hey, I want to use this tool, we had to go through some training in the summer. So we did a 2-day training on our campus and people from, I think 7 campuses came, which was really nice. We negotiated a multiple campus license, which we're going to repeat. So if anybody's interested, don't hesitate to call if you want to try and embed it in a class. But we had to go through some training where they introduced the tool, We looked at different profiles, they showed us some coaching techniques, and then a chance to think about how we might integrate it. So, you know, I wanted to point out, these were some of the research that we used to support so much of what we did with reflection, and I'm really glad we did. When we get to the outcomes, you'll see some of the changes we saw. So, all right, adaptive learning technology. So, this was the other piece we added. So if you go back to your handout, just the first page, all right, so we asked you to do step 1. Whenever students come into the software, they get, and this was, the tool is called Learn Smart. It was a McGraw-Hill product that went along with Dr. Bly's textbook. So you get the question. And the very first question is, well, okay, look at that question. What's your confidence level? How confident are you? Just like you're asked on that first page. And you do that first. And then you go in and you get the same question and you have to answer the question, right? And so this is getting them to think about that. Are you ready or not? Right? Which is a key question, because they're thinking, yeah, I've seen that term before, I can answer that question. But now maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So you're getting on any point, you're getting 2 pieces of data. You're getting their confidence level and whether they had it correct. Until they're both confident and correct, they get the same content back in a different fashion. So they're not just memorizing questions and answers, right? So say you didn't get this, how do the seasons happen, right? So if you open it up to page 2 now in your handout, this would be the equivalent, right? So they're either going to go back to their book, because it's going to keep coming at them in a different way. If you don't understand how the seasons happen, here's another question about it, and it's going to keep coming back to you until you get it right and you're confident about the answer, right? So it's getting them to that point. So you can see that's the process. And then there are analytics on the back end. In this tool, and I'll show you a few that were interesting to us. So you get, as a faculty member, I know it's kind of small, you get to see how much time they spend. You get to see what's their percentage of correctness, and by color and size. You can see over the course of a week who's in trouble. So if anybody needs coaching, right, you can go and say, hey, John, you're only up to 13%, get going. But they can see that themselves. And it's time, this particular product only lets them work at like 15-minute increments a day. You can set that time frame. So because mine were still cramming everything at the last day, I said, no, you can only work 15 minutes a day, but you've got to get it all in. So it forced them to change the habit to say, I'm going to do a little bit today, do a little bit tomorrow, and then they get a refresh thing that builds into the software. Right? I can never do that for every single student, so it's really powerful. But the metacognitive data is really interesting too. This tallies over the course of the semester, right? So how often are they correct and aware that they're correct? How often are they incorrect and unaware? Right? Like, I know this one and I'm confident, right? And they're wrong. So that's the one where you want to see, whoa, who's really off the mark there, right? Where's that going wrong? So when we get to some of the data, we'll see some interesting things. So those are the 2. Any questions about those? And then I'll want to show you the data quick, and then we'll take questions. Okay. So how did we? Why did we pick SAT? How are we going to see, did this make a difference, right? So one of the ways that we did was we took 3 years of data for Dr. Bly's class, and we saw, yeah, there was a pretty strong correlation between SAT critical reading scores and exam averages. So we figured our students had an SAT critical reading score, I was like, I forget it, or come up here, in the 300s, shocking, right? So I didn't expect anybody to be successful at all, because look at this, right? We'd expect them to be way down here on the exam averages, and in fact, they didn't disappoint us, right? They did what we expected, but, so you could say, well, so big whoop, you did all this work, and they did just what you expected them to do, and our numbers are small, so we can't say anything, we can't make any strong claims, but what we did think we started to see, and we hope over time as we get more and more data, we think we did see them starting to close the gap between where these folks, this is the rest of his class, and these were my guys, right? So here's the fall of 20, well, so certainly we did better than the first pilot, right? And we could see, and I don't have this data up here, but for exam 2, 3, and 4, the significance was down to, there was no significant difference between the two groups, where at the beginning in exam 1 and 2, and again in 6, we saw significant difference between the scores. So again, our numbers are so small, but we did see change. And if we looked at, we also gave them a pre and post test, and we looked at them pre, right, and we looked at them again post. Well, so we're close here, but post, certainly there was no significant difference between the groups. So, you know, we think we saw some things, and both of them did better, you know, within their subgroups. They did better in the pre and post test. So we, you know, that's our continuing question. And so here are the comparisons between the pilot groups here. 404 SAT reading in 2012, 359. I mean, I expected disaster, right? But look, so this isn't huge. These aren't differences in their fall GPA, but hey, for these students, I wouldn't expect this. I would expect worse than that, right? And we have seen that. I just think they got a lot of support. So this, you know, these are just some comparisons. When we compared the groups of like SAT, and even this is an exaggeration, I took people in the 1200 cohort, look at the difference. Those who took without the pairing, had that same SAT profile, that was their GPA. People who did it with the standalone course, this was their GPA. And then these were the students who took it with the paired reading course. So we see differences. Again, our numbers are small, they're not significant, but if I'm a student, I'd rather have this than I'd rather have this. So let's see, right? We'll see as we go through time. This is ELLI data, right? So this is what their spider diagrams look like pre and post. So this was somebody in environmental science who took it on the first day of the semester. They did no work with lifelong learning. So you can see it's color coded. So you can see it's almost exactly the same. There's a little bit of change, right? In our in the group that were paired, this is where we see really strong gains for these folks. You can see a big difference between pre and post for them. And I would say, to me, this is interesting because we say, you know, the assumption is you go to college, you change, you grow, but in what ways are you changing and growing? And if Daniel Pink's saying, you know, these kinds of things are really important for the workplace. The fact that students come to class, sit in class, but don't explicitly work on things of this nature, I don't know if they're going to grow and change. I don't know, right? But these kids certainly did. So let's look at the data. So we looked at the control and treatment groups, even though we're not using that in a strict scientific term, just for understanding who the groups were. You can see that there was the groups were similar, right? We didn't see significant difference between the people in BISI and the people who also took my course, except in resilience, which we would expect, right? Because the students that are in my class are at-risk students, so we'd expect them to have some issues with resilience and have low resilience. We did. Did they overcome that, right? So in all other cases, we didn't see big differences between the groups. So looking at the control group, those people who didn't do any work with lifelong learning, pre and post, no big change for those people. No significant difference. Look, even some of them went backwards, right? So in the treatment group, here we had some success. Right, we had huge change, very significant differences, except in learning relationships, which we only did the last week of the semester, right? So I think we can certainly change that and do some more work with that. So that was very encouraging that we saw changes in that way. Then we looked at the adaptive learning technology and the outcomes of environmental science. And the strongest places we saw correlation were between time spent, or the percentage completion, and the quiz averages for him with the point on, if you can see that, are 0.80, right? So we saw some things. We know we didn't have a lot of time to really align the questions from the Learn Smart more closely, and we didn't want to really with the exams. You didn't want it to be memorization. Here's the question, here's the answer, now you see it again, right? So we saw a moderate correlation there, but we didn't see the strong, only within the quizzes. So we need to look at that some more. And then the most interesting thing that we just started was, now let's look at that lifelong learning stuff and the adaptive learning technology, right? Let's look at the metacognitive data from that, and let's see if there are any relationships. And man, sure enough, we don't know what it means yet, right? So, but here we are, critical curiosity in every quadrant of the metacognition with strong significance, right? So I think there's something definitely to keep looking at there. There's something there. We just can't explain it yet. So anyway, that's where we're going next. And we did a lot of reflection analysis. And I won't, I'll go through this quickly, but, in a subsample, we saw lots of students talking about outcomes and change, things they saw in themselves that were different. And that's really encouraging. We never anticipated the science anxiety. When we did the pairing, we got a lot of pushback from students when we call and say, they'd be like, I don't want to take a science course, don't make me take a science course. So you can see how terrified some of them were. And I forget, it was a high percentage of students had science anxiety coming in, right? I'll never like science, it's horrible, I can't do it, it's too hard. And at the end, they see success, you see confidence, right? Their resilience, they're not giving up, right? It's huge. And so we looked at student comments overall. Were they happy with the pair? Because I was afraid it was too intrusive because we were throwing data at them right and left. Now let's look at this, right? What does this mean? You guys did this. And I was afraid it was too much, but they didn't mind, or at least it wasn't intrusive, right? They didn't feel like it was detrimental. A keep, lose, or modify kind of survey. Do you like the pairing? Should we keep it paired with bi-side? 86%, but really they said, most people, what this meant was do it with more classes. So in the comments, they were like, yes, modify it, but modify it and do it more often. They liked the Cornell notes. They were glad I made them do it, and the active learning every week that they had to do with the text. They liked the lifelong learning. They liked what we did, lecture in class. Adaptive learning technology, guess what? That was the one that they were like, I don't know. And we do think that it was because they couldn't see those immediate results. They spent time on it, and they thought that would be the silver magic bullet. That if I do this, that's going to translate to my exam grades. And it's complex. It's never going to be about one thing that you do, right? So we'll see. So I can't believe that was our data, and I want to give Barb, as our springboard partner, a chance to talk about what this experience was like for her going along with us on the journey.
So I'm sure you can see the dedication and enthusiasm my partners had, and I was so glad that they included me in this just so I could see what they were doing. And it really felt like a little community of learners on our campus. They helped me in so many ways. First of all, just seeing what is involved with an IRB, consenting students, designing a project, analyzing all the data, and then we've submitted an article for publication. So that in itself was a wide learning experience. I'll tell you a quick little background of what my project is that I'm going to be piloting in the fall. It's a first-year experience, but it's connected with the library. And Suzanne suggested that I partner with an English 4, which is a developmental English writing class. And she suggested this really, I think, in her own way of mentoring me so that I didn't fall flat on my face. Because I had been working on this idea for over 2.5 years. And when I started it, I was the reference and instruction librarian at the campus. Now I'm the head librarian, and I have been since this summer. And this is a tenure track position. So she has taken me from an idea that was basically, hey, let's have some library-related activities and get our students involved, into something that I can use on the path to tenure, taking this idea and making it a research project. And so by pairing it with this class, she knew that I'd have some guaranteed participation. Because as wonderful as I thought an idea was, that I could sustain through the whole first year, she said, look, pair it with this class and do it for 1 semester. And so, in her very nice way, she got me to think a little more realistically. She also encouraged, or should I say prodded me, to develop a really clear, concise explanation of what my project is. It's called Connected, and it's a game-based library first-year experience in which first-year students earn points by participating in library-related activities and by making connections to others on campus. Now, unfortunately, after hearing Daniel Pink, there is some motivation out there that is a reward. At the end of the semester, whoever has gotten the most points, there's a $2,500 scholarship to come back for the spring semester. But we felt that that hopefully was enough motivation to get students through this. And I'm basing my program on an initiative of the Pennsylvania Library Association, which involves 5 literacies that in some way or another would all impact college students. So again, you know, Suzanne is the one who helped me think through this clearly. And she also kept saying to me, well, what is your real research question? You know, what are you trying to find out? So again, with her prodding, I came up with, to what extent can participating in this library first year experience increase student engagement in our campus community and support first semester students' academic success? And with her use of ELLI, she helped me then find an instrument, which is the ACT College Engage Survey, that will actually measure what I want to look at in this first semester. So I think all those things connected, I would not be at all at this point in my progress without being able to pair with them and see how you go through all this. We submitted a paper, so just that, there was a lot of intellectual investment in that, so that you are really seeing how you have to take all these exciting ideas that you have and kind of rein them in and do the hard work of trying to explain them to someone else. So, I mean, for me, this was a dramatic change for me, and something that has really helped me in this first year of a tenure track position. So, any final thoughts?
I just
or-
want to, first of all, thank Schreier Institute, TLT Operations, and also the Penn State Libraries who funded a lot of what we needed to get up and running, the training. But, you know, and I did keep a project blog, so if people are interested in seeing, I knew I wouldn't remember things at the end, and I knew we wanted to write it up. So I really tried to every week say, this is what we did, this is what we did in class. If you're interested, feel free, go and email me if you're interested in working with ELLI, with anybody in your campus. We hopefully will have the license, and you'll be able to tag along on that. So I think for me personally, it was just an incredible professional moment. It was incredibly wonderful community building on our campus for students and for us, for the 3 of us, and now how that expands into other faculty who are thinking about doing projects. It's been one of the most enriching activities. I thank my partners for that. It was wonderful. So, any questions for us? Thank you for coming. Questions about anything? Yeah, Jen.
Are you going to, is there any way to sort of stay in touch with those students through their track to see if they
Yes,
hold
we're going
on?
to follow. We're going to follow them in the IRB. I think we said for another year we'll follow them. But we see them all the
Yeah.
time now, which is, it's created something that wasn't there. And you know, it's hard on your campus to make that happen. And I think just because this, you know, there was this shared dialogue all the time, that we, you know, there's relationship there. So it's great.
I didn't mention this, but coincidentally, one of our library student workers is in another class that Dr. Blay is teaching. And he was having trouble and was going to drop the class because he got a 56 on his first exam. And he came to me and said, well, I'm going to drop this. And I said, well, can we make a deal? If I work with you and tutor you, even though I don't know anything about biology, if I tutor you before the next exam, and if you get a better score, would you at least work with me? He said, okay. So he did. And I used kind of this adaptive learning technology. Even though there wasn't any software with it, I would give him questions based on the chapter. And then before he answered, I'd say, how sure are you of that answer? And they were multiple choice questions I was presenting him. And sometimes he would say, well, I'm positive. And I'd say, well, why? Well, because it's the longest of the choices, and why would anybody take that much trouble to make up a wrong answer? That really opened my eyes. And we went over this hour after hour, and I learned a lot. And he got an 86. And he came to me and said, I'd like to continue our partnership.
Yeah. He's
And
now
he
the
did.
fourth ranked in the class.
And his next exam was a 92. He has an exam this coming week, and I'm up here, so I worked out all these questions and gave them to him. He came into the library to pick them up today, so he's going to work through that himself. And I did, he has a girlfriend, and I talked to her, and I said, you have to take my place this time, I'm not here. You have to ask him this stuff, and then make sure that he really understands it. Don't just let him give you the answer. Say, well, tell me more about that, or give me another example. What I really hope to instill in him was to be curious about it, because I didn't know anything, and I'd say, why? What are other examples? And he'd look at me like, who cares? And so we'd keep on it, and after a while, he would think of other things. And so I could see, that was something I had never envisioned out of this partnership, but I could see that it was working.
I know people have to go, so but there was another question to you.
Oh, I was just wanting to know, you mentioned some of the other partners around the university. I was just wondering, were you able to collect any previous educational data on your students? Like, did they have IEPs in high school? Or did they have no learning disabilities? Were these like some of the accommodations that the Office of Equity or the Office of Student
We
Disabilities
didn't have
suggested?
anybody that disclosed in the first semester, so as far as I know, I didn't have any students who, but that doesn't mean they aren't there, right? So there was nobody in our group that had worked for our Office of Disability Services, so that's as much as I can say. But ESL though, that was an issue which I didn't talk, and I'm an ESL instructor as well. I think that was part of the low SAT reading score, right? And so we saw within that subgroup, there were certainly students who had less academic preparation and students who had more academic preparation than it was language. So those were all compound absolutely in the data, right? So that we can, again, we have such small numbers. So we hope to keep doing it and have a stronger story to tell as time goes on. So. Thank you, everybody.
If you think of anything,
Thank you.